Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Tactics Board. Today, it's a bumper edition because we're not only looking ahead to Norwich City's third game of the Championship season against Sheffield United, we're also taking a look at Ante Crnac and how he fits in at his new team after becoming the Canaries' fifth signing of the summer. But we'll start at Carrow Road and City's next opportunity to get their first league win under Johannes Hoff Thorup. It feels like they're headed in the right direction. Of course, they got that Carabao Cup win over Stevenage last week. They put in a pretty decent performance against Blackburn that was only denied 3 points by a very late equaliser. And it does feel like there's a little bit more positivity around the direction that the project is going in. But the Blades probably present their toughest test of the campaign so far. They struggled in the Premier League last season, of course, but they've come down, made some good additions, and they are looking strong under Chris Wilder once again. So it won't be easy, but Thorup will feel he's got the players and the ability to, on their day, get a result here. So without further ado, here's the 11 I think he'll choose to get the job done. I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Jose Cordoba in the centre of defence, with Callum Doyle at left back, Kenny McLean and Mankwa Forson and Marcelino Nunez in the centre of midfield, Gabe Forsyth on the right, Borja Sainz on the left and Josh Sargent on his own through the middle. And I think that defensive unit, again, will be a point of discussion after what was a pretty difficult afternoon for Shane Duffy against Blackburn. Outpaced for that first goal and struggled with his distribution throughout, really. I think after that one, there are a lot of people very keen to see Norwich move on from him and Grant Hanley and go to the younger players, but I still feel that team selection gave a bit of insight into how Thorup views it, where he thinks the likes of Brad Hills and Jayden Warner are, and it didn't really convince me that he's going to chuck them in just yet, especially when you consider the left centre-back option, which is Jose Cordoba, who I'm obviously going to come on to. I think he'll want to see him with somebody slightly more experienced before he goes for maybe the slightly bigger risk that is throwing a Hills in there, for example. But I think he'll wait and see how this duo does from the start. And the reason I've gone for Cordoba alongside Duffy is because he's now had another full week of training. He had more than 30 minutes against Blackburn, and it does feel like in terms of that match fitness, he must be getting towards that. Now, we look at the calibre of player that he is, how highly rated he is behind the scenes, and the defensive struggles Norwich have had so far. It would take an incredibly patient man to still put off his inclusion at this stage. And although Thorup is that to a degree, I can't see him delaying it any longer. And I think he'll be there at left centre-back. And when you consider that, I think the left-back choice is a natural one. Callum Doyle, for me, has to be in that team. The quality that he has on the ball, as he displayed for his assist for Norwich's first goal in that Blackburn game, is evident. And although maybe he does look slightly more comfortable as a centre-back because maybe his pace doesn't warrant being on the flank out there on his own, I think his strengths more than make up for it, to be honest, in the Championship side. And Ben Crnac, for me, although you can see the attributes that they picked out, and he's clearly somebody with potential, great age, I think right now Doyle looks just a bit more ready than him. And in a tough game where there'll be a lot of individual battles, I think Doyle is probably somebody who a head coach will feel safer putting in that 11 than Ben Crnac at the moment. That's not to say that he won't start again this season. I'm sure there will be plenty of game time for him. But for me right now, it feels like Doyle is quite far ahead of him. And if you've got Cordoba in that left centre-back role, it's only natural for him to play at left-back. And the other position I wanted to talk about, and I actually wrote a piece about this in the week that you can go and read now across our channels. There's a little plug for you that you might not have been expecting. But that right-wing position is definitely a very interesting one. Of course, it was Forsyth that started that Blackburn game, to a lot of people's surprise. I think most people were maybe expecting to see Abu Kamara after his performance in that Stevenage game, but we all know what's happened with him since then. Of course, he's handed in a transfer request. Forsyth was pretty good, maybe didn't set the world on fire, but he certainly looked like he was comfortable. He didn't look like a fish out of water or anything like that. He looked like he sort of belonged in the Championship. And at this stage of his career, that feels like a significant development and a good stage to be at. So when you take the whole Kamara situation into consideration, I think he's ahead of him. Onel Hernandez is an argument for, after those 2 goals in that Stevenage game, came off the bench against Blackburn and made a little bit of a difference. But it still feels that Thorup doesn't quite fancy him to the extent that he's going to be starting him out wide in league games. Of course, he completely missed that first game of the season. He was out of the matchday squad. And although I actually think some of his strengths will really suit this game when we come on to what Sheffield United offer tactically and where some of their strengths are, I think Hernandez would be really helpful. I just think on a personal level and maybe a technical level, which is a very important part of the Thorup system, of course, I think he sees Forsyth a little bit ahead of Hernandez at the moment. So I've just about gone for Forsyth, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of a number of options. One of those, of course, is Crnac, who we'll come on to later in this video. But that's the team dealt with largely. I think most of the rest of it is fairly predictable. And although the midfield does have a few issues in there at the moment, it doesn't feel like Norwich are going to go and recruit that typical number 6 that a lot of fans want to see. And McLean does look like the most natural option among those who are already there for that slightly deeper role, especially when you've got Jakob Sorensen out through injury. So I feel the rest of the team speaks for itself, really. There are a couple of areas that Thorup will have a few decisions to make over, but that's the 11 that I think he'll choose. On to the tactical challenges that Sheffield United provide, and I'm going to start with what's becoming a common theme after last week, and that is aggressive left-backs. Of course, Blackburn have Harry Pickering, and I was talking about the threat that he could provide last week. I actually thought Norwich dealt with that fairly well, and maybe that bodes well for this weekend, because Harrison Burrows for the Blades is another really attacking fullback who likes to get forward down that left flank. Impressed with Peterborough United in League One last season, has come to Sheffield United, and I think he's made a decent impression on their fans as well. But the defensive side of the game is one that he doesn't necessarily thrive on. Sheffield United don't still operate with that back 5 that I think Chris Wilder became famous for, and in that setup he probably would have thrived actually with slightly less defensive responsibility. But in a back 4 he feels slightly vulnerable, and that might be an area for Norwich to exploit. However, when they're defending, there is a little bit of an issue there, because not only do they have to defend against him, but they have to defend against Gustavo Hamer, who I'm sure most Norwich fans will be aware of, whether that's in a red and white shirt or a Coventry one previously, when he was a massive part in them getting to the playoff final alongside Callum Doyle actually. And he's being played in that wider left role, which not only means there will be a tough test for Jack Stacey in terms of personnel, and obviously he's a very, very good player, a good creator, but it means that there will be the space for Burrows to exploit, because naturally, as a central midfielder who's playing out wide, he likes to come inside. He's right-footed as well, so he will create that space for Burrows out wide by trying to drag Jack Stacey and whoever's on that right wing inside as well. So that's something Norwich will have to watch out for. But as I said, they actually did that fairly well last week. So if they can keep that up, then they'll be in a decent position. I think Stacey, for all the criticism he gets for some of his technical failings at times, and I actually think that's a little bit over-egged to an extent. I think he's a decent technical footballer, if not perfect. But for all that criticism, he still gets up and down very well. He still works very hard, and although defensively he can be exposed by the position he's asked to play, if you give him a one-on-one battle down that side, he tends to prevail very often, and he does have the work ethic to do that. But of course, to make it one-on-one rather than 2 versus 1, and to negate the tactical challenges that having Hamer and Burrows on that same wing provides, you will need that right winger to work with him and to do the defensive side as well, which, to be fair to Forsyth, although I thought he struggled with physicality at times, he did have that tactical strength defensively, and he was getting back where he needed to. So if it's him, that's encouraging. If it's someone else like Onel Hernandez, I think he would thrive under that. In the unlikely case that it's Abu Kamara as well, I think maybe that would be a bit of a problem. So that might be another reason why he's unlikely to be included. But to be honest, for all the things going on around him, it feels like he probably won't be starting in that right wing position. anyway. But that left side for Sheffield United is definitely something that Norwich need to keep an eye on. Another one in terms of the individual quality that they have is Callum O'Hare in that number 10 position. And I mentioned the fact that Norwich are lacking a true number 6. They've only got Kenny McLean in there really, and he is probably more of an 8 and has displayed those characteristics throughout his career, despite playing a lot of last season at centre-back. When you consider that and the fact that the other two midfielders, Enforson and Nunez, aren't really too defensively minded, they could be left exposed in that area between the lines that O'Hare likes to pick up the ball, likes to drive at the defence, has the technical quality to create loads of chances and leave defenders really exposed. He's been a great signing for them. And if Norwich don't adapt well to minimise the space that he has between the lines, that will be another concern and something that they need to be aware of. Of course, he's one of a number of very talented individuals that United will be bringing to Carrow Road, and those individual battles have to be something that Norwich are careful of not getting dragged into too much. I spoke about the situation out on the left. Again, they need to make sure they're not being outnumbered, that they're using tactical superiority, if not individual superiority, because you look at the list of names in that squad, it will be tricky if you get left 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 too often. So tactically, a lot of work to do defensively. We know Thorup likes to focus on the attack, but when you look at Sheffield United and the quality that they have, there will have to be a bit of a focus on that as well. Now we're going to finish with a topic that I'm sure many of you have come for, and that is the new man, Ante Crnac. Of course, an £8.5 million signing, tasked with bolstering City's strike force, but probably not only that, given Josh Sargent's quality at this level. It's likely that we see him out wide. We could even see him in a sort of advanced midfield position, given where he's played in his career. And that versatility is actually something Norwich really wanted when they were looking for an Adamida replacement, and it's something they identified in the 20-year-old. So tactically, I think it poses a few questions, probably a few opportunities for Norwich as well. But when you look at how Thorup's model worked at Nordsjælland, it was very often the left winger that would tuck in and be the sort of inside winger. And I think when you look at Norwich, that is a consistent theme with Borja Sainz, who not only sort of naturally plays that role and is suited to that role, but has been deployed in that way by Thorup. But then on the right at Nordsjælland, he tended to have a more chalk on the boots winger who would get on the ball, run straight at the fullback and try and create chances that way. But that's not really how Crnac would operate off the right, and I'm assuming it would mainly be the right because of Sainz's quality. I mean, you saw that Blackburn game in terms of what he can offer in the Championship. So it feels like the right is more likely, but that would probably mean two players coming in and coming onto their stronger feet, because Crnac has a fantastic left foot. That's actually a position he often took up even when he was starting as a striker. To try and get more of the ball, he would drop wide, try and pick the ball up there and then drive inside on it. And I found it interesting that actually in his first club interview, he spoke about the fact that he likes running at goal with the ball, he likes to dribble, and that's not often something you hear from sort of your classic box strikers. So I think that's a role that he would relish as well. You look at some of the other strengths that Norwich have, and Jack Stacey is somebody I've talked about earlier in this video, his drive up that wing. If you had somebody cutting in there, he would be able to make the most of even more space. Of course, currently the system is set up for him to be high up the pitch and to drive towards the opposition box. This would create even more space out wide. Crnac's cutting in and sort of unleashing on that left foot. So as a right winger, which is where I currently see him most likely starting on a regular basis if he's going to break into that team, and it won't be easy because he's coming from the Polish league and it is a big step up, as we saw with Przemysław Błacheta. But if he does manage to break into that team on a regular basis, I think right wing looks like it will be where it happens, and there are a lot of strengths to that. You know, his ability to come inside from long range, he's really, really good. Scored a number of goals last season from that source, actually, and it would get the best out of Jack Stacey. But in terms of what Thorup wants to see, I think it would be interesting how he adapts his system, because that would be a change from how it looked at Nordsjælland. But there are also a lot of aspects that will suit him as a number 9, and I found it interesting reading some quotes from the sporting director at his previous club saying when he signed that they did see him as a number 9. They thought that was the area where they were most likely to get the best out of him and he was most likely to achieve things. And you look at some of the abilities that he does have, and you can understand why. He scored a good number of headed goals last season. Aerially, he looks like a real threat, and he is a very good finisher. So when the chance gets presented to him in the box, he will put it away. I mean, I suppose I'm painting the picture of an almost complete footballer at this stage, and there are obviously weaknesses. His goal scoring record wasn't amazing last season, but I think he has shown that he has a few different aspects that actually would suit both roles, and you could see why Norwich like that versatility. I think tactically he maybe could replicate Josh Sargent, not perfectly, because I don't think he currently has the sort of physical build of Josh Sargent, and he probably couldn't shrug defenders off as easily as the American does. But he could win the same sorts of headers. He could show those bursts of pace that Sargent does very often to get in behind. And I think he does have the qualities to play both roles. It's just about how quickly he can adapt to the Championship. And also, you know, as I've mentioned, and as a lot of us have mentioned since the news sort of first really broke, it's about where those opportunities come up. And right now it feels like they might be limited up front. But I'm sure we're all looking forward to seeing what sort of role he plays, if any, in the game tomorrow. I'm sure he'll be at least involved in the matchday squad. It should be an exciting one. And of course, we'll have every kick covered across our channel. So go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and you won't miss a thing. Thank you for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you next time, hopefully, and I keep saying this, but hopefully after a first league win of the campaign.